Hello and welcome to the Ripping Pages with me, Liam Bishop, curating the world's most interesting writers to inspire you. I'm here with part 2 of my conversation with Yen Ge to discuss her life and writing. Yen was born in Chengdu, Sichuan province in the People's Republic of China. Emerging as a prodigious writer in Chinese and Sichuanese, in 2012 she was chosen as Best New Writer by the prestigious Chinese Literature Media Prize. For English language readers, however, Nicky Harman first translated her novella, White Horse, for Hope Road Publishing in 2014. A story about young girls negotiating adolescence in the presence of a mysterious white horse. Then, 4 years later, Nicky translated The Chilli Bean Paste Clan in 2018, and that was published by Balestier. Set in a fictional village in Sichuan province where Yen herself grew up, it focuses on a family who own, as the title indicates, a chili bean paste factory. Several generations of the family are preparing for a grandmother's 80th birthday, despite a philandering father's attempts to derail the plans. Strange Beasts of China was then published by Tilted Axis Press in 2020, this time translated by Jeremy Tiang. Named as one of the New York Times notable books of 2021, it's an alluring and mysterious story about mythical beasts, and when it was published, it suggested a writer of extraordinary range, even if we didn't have all of Yen's work translated into English. So when Elsewhere arrived in 2023 and published by Faber, Yen treated us to a new dimension of her work entirely. Short fiction and, for the first time, written in English directly from Yen's pen. There's still so much of Yen's work that hasn't been translated into English. But Yen clearly is a writer who continues to defy expectations of readers and perhaps herself. This is the second part of my conversation with Yen, and we're celebrating Women in Translation Month. If you want to go and listen to the first part, you can catch up on that now, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining me for the second part of our conversation. Before we get going, remember to like, share, follow, subscribe, or leave a review if you enjoy the show. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it. In the way that you've put it, which is everything sort of comes through me and comes out of me, and that means for me, when you say that, that means that there are parts of me that I'm not completely aware of that go into this, that go onto the page, and I think that's something that you can see within your stories. I mean, think about I know this is a novel that was written over 20 years ago now for you. The Strange Beasts of China. This is about a person who is identifying with things that are otherized, beasts, mythical, and she's trying to find these beasts, these mythical beasts within China, and she engages with them, she kisses them, she touches them, approaches them. And I'm not trying to say this is what's happening with you and your writing process, but I think you do write about these experiences where people are identifying with things that feel different or distinct from themselves, but could be related to them in some way, and embracing them maybe as well.
You really don't have a bigger picture most of the time. But what makes all those things mine is because all the things that goes onto the page would have to go through me. And I think that happens to everybody. This is what creative process is like. It's like this exercise of like your individuality, and this everything that goes in would go through you. And you don't need to think about yourself. When you really are working on the story, you yourself, like your taste, your value, the things you want to say, your experiences, they will be there inevitably because they have to go through you. Most of the time, I feel I'm completely failing this game and I'm kind of hanging on the cliff. May I say, I also think this just about hanging on the cliff is my comfort zone as a writer. If you're like, when we're talking about like this idea of, like how much of your sort of volition do you relinquish to be like, I would just, I would just acknowledge like they're part of me that I don't understand, or just let those parts do their thing. And I feel that was really pronounced in the process of like writing Strange Beasts of China, because I pretty much wrote that book in this hallucinatory state. It has to be like the urgency has to be pushed to an impossible level. Do I then go into my study, go into my bedroom, and then took out my laptop and be like, okay, I'm going to write this chapter. And I often write it overnight. I have my dinner, I go in, and my editor was like, I need it tomorrow. We're going into print. And then typically from 9 to 10 p.m. to the next day to like 9 to 10, sometimes 12, the next day morning,
Goodness
I'll
me.
finish the chapter and then I will send it in to the editor. It was completely like nocturnal, like all the chapters. And I was like, in a way, really like as a 22, 1 year old, kind of just really letting go of myself, just like,
Mm.
just vomit everything out. And that's how I wrote that book. And I think about it with kind of a tingling sense of shame, maybe like now it's like, this is so audacious and irresponsible of me as a writer. And I feel like at one point I'd be like, okay, I really need to do this. And I would just like either lock myself in my own apartment or like I would just be disappearing from the rest of the world. Or I'll be like, in one case, really like going to this like a very shitty hotel, like in a strange city, and then just like going into this like short spell of like explosion, really like, and then just like I did it maybe 3 times, and every time I got incredibly sick afterwards. But at that point, when I was in my early 20s, I could sit down in a day and I could averagely write, well, in Chinese characters, I could averagely write 20,000 to 30,000 characters a day.
Goodness me.
So that's
That's
translating
crazy.
into English. It's like 15,000 to 20,000 words per day.
Wow. Okay.
I wouldn't
Uh,
necessarily keep all of those words, characters, but like that's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
my
yeah, of
youth.
course.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
so then I think at that point I had this sort of a confidence or like I don't know, ignorance.
Goodness
And that
me.
was like that kind of explosive energy that I used to have.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was like Strange Beast of China. Like I don't know if you can feel it because obviously
It's so interesting. It is, and it must be so sh strange. I bet. I imagine, sure it is a pleasure on some level, but it must be strange to sort of see something that you wrote in that time that you just indicated to us that period of time, and then see it. Then it was put in the New York Times best books of 2020, and I'm sure that's probably not what you expected based on what you just said.
what happened to the English translation of Strange Beasts of China. And it was absolutely crazy to me. I could not understand. You're like, you have like, you're convinced with this writer's career or this writing trajectory you wanted to devote yourself to. It's like, those are the projects I'm really devoting myself to. Those are the things I just randomly did on the side. And you didn't think much of them. And then one of them then being translated into English, and then everybody really liked it. And you're like, oh, I've been so wrong this whole time. Like I was like so helplessly wrong. Like just like the things I thought were important were completely not
Mm.
important to all the other people. They it was whatever it was kind of it was very strange to me like just to but at the same time I'm obviously very very happy like to see like how that was sort of embraced by a lot of readers and people will reach out to
Definitely.
me
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Instagram or like at different channels like for just for Strange Beasts of China because it was such an old book and to have that and also like because when I look at it I really see the 21, 22-year-old me in it. That person was like so bruised, so like openly injured and vulnerable and kind of bleeding in front of everybody all the time. And that's
Mm.
how I see like I look at that book, I see that me.
Wow.
And I obviously felt really sorry for that person.
Well, the book tells me, now you said that, but the book did tell me about a person who's trying to identify with other vulnerable creatures. The beasts, they are vulnerable. They're getting killed off by people, and these beasts cause chaos. And the senses you're right, the whole city went mad, fully revealing the depths of its perversion, and it conjures up these other parts of, these repressed elements, I guess, of people and society. And there is a lot of vulnerability within the story, I would say. For me, it's a great pleasure that we got it, and it's really gracious and and candid of you to be so open and honest about that. But I think I think in the context of your work, obviously it's vital, isn't it? And it's a really I'm so glad that we did obviously get it, and I'm sure people have read into that in that way as well, and identified with their own sort of vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel that that book is incredibly raw and
Mm,
vulnerable. I think when you were young, you really allow yourself to be stupid, to be like
mm,
to be kind of just and it's fine because you're young and it doesn't feel stupid because you're young. And now it's like now it's I feel everybody I know like working as a writer, we are all kind of negotiating in between this kind of like almost like crippling self-doubt. You're just
mm,
like, I can't do this. I'm such a, you have this imposter syndrome. You feel like I don't know how to write actually. Like it's really like a crippling with this self-doubt. But I feel in a way anyone who doesn't have it would not really be able to write like in any serious manner. Maybe I don't know if serious is the right word, but like in this existing in this particular part of like the writing world, I feel everybody who are here were just in deep self-doubt because that's how you could push yourself to go to those unlikely places, right? That's almost like your
mm,
gift. But you also need to really be careful to not let that completely swallow you, to be emancipated by that sort of almost like a dark power, to be completely like debilitated by it. You also have to be pushed back against it, against that crippling doubt, to be like, but no, you find this kind of like almost like a narrow gap where you can push yourself through to be like, I'm inching forward against this like impossible pressure, this impossible doubt. But I still can like go forward on the page, one word a time.
mm.
That's very,
Editing. I tell you what, yeah, and if the stupid and crazy things you did when you were young were writing novels, then I think.
but I
Well,
think like reflecting back to that period, where I was writing in the way I was describing to you, I just have those crazy all-consuming sort of spell of writing periods, and then I very often, all the time actually, without exception, I would get very sick. And I think once I finished the book, and I was like all swollen up, and I got sent to the hospital. I was doing IV and ended up like staying in hospital for like a week, I think 5 days or something. I was like incredibly sick. Um, Reflecting back, I think, and then we talk a little bit about like the way I'm working now, and I think so much of that is really because like I don't really have the physical strength like nowadays to push through like those kind of writing periods. But I think back then so much of it, like Strange Beasts of China, was written right after, I guess, a few months after my mom's death. For my career as a writer, or for me as a writer, it's so significant because I didn't think I wanted to be a writer. I was telling you a little bit like I was writing, I had books published, but I really didn't think I was a writer, or I wanted to be a writer. And then I think it was after that I felt very strongly like I wanted to devote myself to this practice. I wanted to be a writer, and I think for a few years, for maybe more than a few years, writing was the thing that could that could almost save me from the incredible pain from the loss of somebody that were so close to. Like I just couldn't, like that's the thing that kind of propped me up throughout that really dark period of my life, and it kind of went on for definitely maybe near 10 years. And then I think in that period writing is was the most important thing, and in many ways I felt it was more important than my life. And then obviously I was on my own. Nobody was like, and I didn't do this as a way of punishing myself. I was just, that was the most important thing to me, is to write, and nothing else mattered. So it was such a like, it was such a weird, not weird, but it's very cathartic maybe in a way, but like obviously super unhealthy. And I think now, like what changed was now I have a child. Like I think for that period of my life, for me, it's like I'm a person who lost their mother, and I'm a person therefore living in this irredeemable isolation and, and solitude that I just writing is the only thing that could momentarily save me from it. Obviously, writing is also very important because I'm also a mother now myself, and I feel it's very important for me to live. And I do actively want to, if I can, to be there for my child when he grows up, as he grows up. And I think that's so important to me, probably as important as my writing.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah, and thank you for. And I'm sorry to hear some of those experiences. It's a relatively young age, isn't it, to lose your mother, and I guess the context then behind these kind of this creative process. But it sounds like, and I think this is a thing about writing. And I hear, we talk about the writing process and we talk about, what is a writer and what does a writer look like? What does a writer do? And there is a kind of, I think also there is a mythical idea of the flurries of sort of really creative, perhaps a maddening process to some extent. But also it sounds like you have a healthy relationship with writing now, whether that leads to 300 or 400 words a day or not. But it sounds like you have a sort of maybe a sense of balance, perhaps. I don't know if that's the right word or
Mm,
not, but
yeah,
and
definitely. Yeah.
that is for me I think that is as desirable as it is to be a writer, and get published, and as many as the listeners will feel as well. I think also there's something to be said for, that is desirable as well.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, I try. Obviously, just yeah. I think writing is uh, there was like this wildness of me, of the writer in that book that I feel I have been sort of taming or kind of trying to civilize that person, that part of me throughout the years to maybe fit in, to be like, oh, because I think there's also a danger of like when you begin to think you are this kind of writer, you kind of begin to create a box. Like you gradually box your in through your writing, through all the feedback, no matter how much you want to ignore that. But all those things, they kind of begin to affect you. And then you're like, this is who I am, this is how I write. Because if you compare Chinese to China to like most of my most sort of well-known novels, books in Chinese. And the contrast between those two bodies of work were gastronomical, kind of just people would not believe they were from the same person. And I do think by the English publication of it, I think it also reintroduced me myself to this book, or this book to me. I have like been doing a lot of reflecting on like what do I want to do as a writer? Who am I as a writer? And I mean, I think like organically, those are my desires as an artist. Those are the things I want to say as artist naturally, instead of like instead of being this person being kind of in either explicit or implicit way being disciplined by your environment, by the society or the literary demands of you as like especially like a writer of a particular gender, a writer of a particular age, a writer coming from a particular social or cultural background. And I think it really helped me to reflect on those things, to kind of try to come out of this box in Chinese and also probably more so in English, to be like, oh yeah, I can also do those things. And those are the things I enjoyed doing. Those are the places I enjoyed visiting. And why don't I try to go there again? Not necessarily like going back into like literally Strange Beasts of China's world. But it was a really good thing for me actually to be able to very luckily having the English translation of it coming out at that point of my career, and to remember this, to remember that me, and to learn from that person again.
Mate, that's amazing. That is really that's such a I think that's such a lovely message. And I'm really glad that you were afforded that afforded that experience. Obviously, that book came from a particular time in your life, but I'm glad that it is through the process of translation and being translated that's helped with that. It's a journey that you might have gone on anyway, I'm sure, but I'm really glad to hear, and I hope other people can have similar experiences like that. It's a healthy journey that's that you've gone on, and I think that's what other people should have access to as well. Hopefully. But being inspired by a younger self, and not many people can do. Think, like I said, think back to my
No,
younger self, whether it's
I
not
think I
inspiring
think
me.
we all can if we go back, and we will all be able to find something that were kind of
Yeah, of
like,
course.
that were like artificially cut off by the society, and then we have to reclaim that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You've got to, yeah, you've got to fight, but that's, I mean, you've got to learn from your past, haven't you? You've got to learn from your past self. Um, balance. It sounds like
Yeah, I
balance has
mean,
been
I
achieved.
I feel like I I personally really feel like I have lucked out in a way that I have lived almost like a multiple lives, both as
Mm.
like an individual, like in my personal lives, but also I think in my creative life, I have somehow managed to kind of not starving to death on the one hand, but on the other hand, like managed to really push the boundaries within my own ability or how I was perceived. Like I was able to do things outside of a series of existing boxes and then moving to different literary realms. Yeah, and yeah, I think like say even with like between Chilli Bean Paste Clan and Strange Beasts of China,
Mm.
like there were 5 years between those two books. Like those two books are also so different.
They do feel like different books. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll have a quick break on the Rippling pages. Do come back. We're going to talk more to Yenga about her work. So yeah, I'm going to get another coffee. Yen, I don't know about you. Now, if I owned a bookshop, it would look like the Rippling Pages. And the Rippling Pages does have a bookshop. Now, it's not a real bookshop, it's an online bookshop, and it's hosted by bookshop.org.uk. Now, I've got all the books from all the guests that have appeared on the show on my own webpage for the Rippling Pages. So if you go on there, you can see Yen's books, you can see Benjamin Markovit's book, you can see Vincenzo Lotronico's book. All of the guests that have appeared on the Rippling Pages are there. The great thing about bookshop.org.uk is that they source all of their books from independent booksellers. So if you order from there, it's come from an independent bookshop somewhere in the country. Not only that, if you order directly from the Rippling Pages store, I get a very small commission, which is it's super helpful. I wouldn't tell you this if I didn't think it was important, but that commission that I get from any books bought on the in the bookshop goes straight back into the podcast. I've got to pay for website hosting, technology upgrades, all that kind of thing, subscriptions to help with the social media outputs. So yeah, please do consider buying the books if you've enjoyed today or any other episode from the Ripping Pages Bookshop. There's a link in the show notes. Okay, let's get back into it.
How many coffees are you having a
How many
day?
co- I love coffee. I usually have 5 a day. Is that a lot? Is that not? I get lambasted for that
No,
at
no.
work.
I used to have a lot of coffee. Yeah. Now I don't. Now I can only drink tea.
Oh right, I know. I could drink more if I wanted to, but sometimes I have 6.
Yeah, no.
Hello, welcome back to the
Sorry.
Ripping Pages. No, sorry. Hello and welcome back to the Ripping Pages. I'm here with Yenga talking about her work, life, her writing. Before the break, we were talking about your short stories. We were talking about your novel, Strange Beasts of China, your different sort of ways, your different creative periods, and how that's changed over time. Different tone, not the tone so much, but what I found in the Chilli Bean Paste Clan is that Nicky appeared to rely a lot more on sort of English idioms, and I don't know if that was because there were lots of idioms that you wrote that had to be translated, but also because, or whether that was because that was the better way to convey a complex thought, or I don't know. I don't know if
Mm,
there's lots of words that relate to quite simple concepts in English. I don't know. That's what I found, and I thought that was really interesting. I really noticed that because that's something that doesn't come through in elsewhere. Uh,
yeah.
and Strange Beast is a lot more kind of. It's a kind of, well, it's a family novel, isn't it? Chili Bean Paste Clan. It's a family novel, and it's
Serving is just it was Nikki did such an excellent job. And also I felt it was almost like an impossible mission to translate it, really. And I think at the sort of an early stage of this translating project, and I think me and Nicky for this thing have worked quite closely. Whereas say Jeremy, when he did Strange Beasts of China, he just did it himself. He kind of maybe asked me 10 questions. That's it. And then he's done. He's like, we did. Whereas with me and Nikki, we were like really talking a lot about like all the decisions. And I think of it cool. And maybe like say, Chilli Bean Paste Clan in Chinese, imagining it like written by like say Erwan Welsh. Like it was written in a very particular regional English, and then you have all the sound, all the, obviously you have all the voices of the characters, like the particular sayings. So it's not standard English. If that has to come into a different language, so then the biggest problem I think for big or the one of the main decisions Nikki had to make at the early stage was what kind of English do we want to translate this book into? And I think the answer is has to be like a generic English. Because if we translate it into any regional English, and it will be very strange because you'll be like, did this take place in Scotland or like Northern Ireland? Whatever like original English you choose, it will kind of spoil it.
Either way, we got we got your work in English, and we've got more of your work in English, and I think having that context is important, though, isn't it? I think, and it's good that people to know that there is a this kind of locality to it and to the language, and things are lost, aren't they? Obviously things are lost when you translate, but things are obviously gained. We've gained a lot translation. The one thing that Chili Bean Paste does make me think about, and I thought we could just finish on this, is food. Food seems incredibly important to your work. It seems to be sort of everywhere. And also talking about some of your writing process, you have an introduction in the Chilli Bean Paste Clan. You talk about having to move away to write this book and having to write about home. You had to move away, and I don't know if that relates to the idea of translation as well. I think you talk about the frozen yogurt you had to sort of get through to finish the novel. But food seems so important, and not only is it sometimes it's quite intense experience, but it's also a pleasurable experience. It's something that people share experiences about, and obviously you've got this family that are centered around this chili bean paste.
Yeah, I know other people like I have to say this is one of the things I myself had no idea that was happening for so long until like other people begin to talk. Like now obviously I know because so many people have told me both like in Chinese and like here in English. So I understand that. But I was very puzzled by it actually, because if you talk to anybody who knows me like in person, I'm like the most boring eater. But I feel like in a way, like maybe it's my deprivation. It's like all the things that I lack, like all the things like I have been a vegetarian for so many years, and so when I wrote Chili Bean Paste Clan, there were like all those kind of meat and the kind of like different things going around, and I can confidently say that I probably did not had no idea what meat tastes like at that point. Either this like very repressed craving or just like complete like imagination. But I do think starving, like this idea of like hunger, again related to food as well, is something that I'm fascinated with, like both as a writer but also as an individual and as like as a person. I'm gonna say I feel it's almost like a national theme. It's almost like my ancestral memory, because I think when I was growing up, the thing I hear the most when I was a child is all the grown-ups around me talking about how much they were starved back when they were young, like my mom and dad, like my parents, like because in
Wow.
China there was like this big famine. I'm gonna say in the 50s, maybe I'm wrong. But when my parents' generation, like all those people,
Would that be
they were growing up.
That'd be Mao's era, wouldn't it? With the
Yeah, yeah, that
Great
would be
Famine,
like
yeah, yeah.
before, I'm gonna say before Cultural Revolution. Really, like I'm a bit much. So I feel like obviously me myself have never gone through that. We were like as a generation, we're very fortunate. But I feel like that was like one of my early memories of like having this overwhelming sort of narrative coming down to you from all the grown-ups around you about how they were so starved. My dad would be talking about like he had to like the ways he would go as a boy to kind of find food and how he was constantly like starving. And then my mom would say, like, that's something that definitely, I think, maybe in a very fundamental way affected how I see, how I perceive the world. So I wanted to say this is my ancestral memory, like my obsession towards this sensation of like being starved. I feel it's part of the ancestral memory. It's like a national theme for me.
Thank you for, well, thanks. It sounds like you've thought about, you've had to think about that, but that is fascinating. But it's food is everywhere. I mean, unless I'd love to know if there's any readers out there who've read, yeah, and I don't know if they've picked up on this as well, but it's one of the first things that I picked up and I said, all right, there's quite a lot of food references here. And you talk about the food critic and it also ties in with some of those ideas we spoke about earlier, the orality of it, the sensation, the feeling that people get from food, how the mouth is sort of giving us information about the world, how our body. There's one point where you talk about the couple ate breakfast together. This is in Shooting an Elephant. The couple ate breakfast together, during which Shan
Yes.
Shan brought up questions that have been simmering in her guts since yesterday. And it's just that image of this is within,
Mm,
I'm feeling it. I have a hunger to sort of
mm,
ask this
mm.
question. So things like that, not that that moment's particularly significant, but yeah, it's not just about food. It's about how the sort of maybe digestive elements and the body tell us information about the world. And then
Mm,
you talking
mm.
about this ancestral, it's an ancestral memory,
Yeah,
idea of starving.
I
But
am convinced this is what it is. Because whenever I think, like even now, like I think of my dad, the first thing I think of is how he was starved as a child. Like, because that's the story he tell all the time. It's about the stories of him trying to find food, fighting with his brother on the last bowl of porridge. It's all sorts of things. Like you just immediately think, and now he's like an overweight person, as in once he has access to, this abundance of food and he just couldn't control himself. And which is a story for many people of his generation, like in China. And I feel this, yeah, there's like, they just the tension basically. There is this like ultimate tension between an individual and the food. I think especially maybe I don't know about say in Ireland, probably also like me and my husband often talk about the famines. Ireland also
yeah,
had the
yeah, yeah.
big famine. And I feel like obviously the Irish famine happened many years before, like as in its distance to the present time. But still, I feel like that's such a huge part of the national identity for the Irish as well. So I feel like that there's definitely some kind of link. Maybe that's why we're married. We're like the
Is he
children of
Irish?
yeah, but sorry, my husband is Irish, the context.
Uh,
The children of famine.
well, maybe. Well, I think either way, it's interesting. It sounds like a PhD topic for someone. If anyone wants to write a
I
PhD
don't know. I don't know anybody. Just
on
by
who
like
wants to write a PhD about you, that might be a way in.
I really did not know that was in my English writing. That's such a that I'm gonna have to think about it. Yeah, I know like in my
Sorry, well, I've
Chinese writing.
unturned it now. I've unturned the stone now, have I? So I made you conscious of it. Maybe it's not though. Maybe
I
it's just
am
me. Maybe it's just me. Do
I
write
no
into
no
the
no
Ripping
no
Pages.
it's fine. No, I mean it's good to know. It's good to kind of understand these things or like to see those things could potentially stand out like in other people's eyes because I know like say Chilli Bean Paste Clan when they came out in China like in Chinese everybody was like do not read this book when you don't have snacks around you.
Interesting. But there's also an element of disgust in that as well. You talk about the process of making chili bean paste and the fermentation of it. That doesn't sound massively appealing either. So there's both sides of it. There's the disgust and then there's a desire for it and the
That
constant,
is like the process of making chili bean paste. Like I completely made it up. I have no idea how to make chili bean paste. Can I say this? Because some people are like, "Oh, she's such an expert." Like completely made it up. Have no idea how this was done. So do not trust that is the actual process.
well, maybe, well, I mean, I think that says quite a lot, actually, the fact then that you've kind of put this idea in of fermentation. But I think, a lot of times it's a shared experience, which I think sometimes food is a shared experience for the people, whether it's results in good relationships, bad relationships, but it's a shared experience. And I think that's an important thing in the context of your work. Um, I think that might be a nice place to leave it as well, yeah.
Can I tell, like, sorry, I don't know if you'll know this. So in the novel I'm working on, one of the main characters is called Liam.
There's a Liam in here. There's a Liam in here, isn't there? There's a Liam in
Yeah, so
elsewhere as well.
that is kind of spiritually the same Liam.
All
And
right. It's an Irish
so
name,
then I was
actually.
like, I know it's Irish name, yeah. So I was like, you know that when I got your email, I was like, oh, this is serendipitous. Must be a sign.
Yenga, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Rippling Pages. You know, we've talked a lot. We've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about your work, all of which are, well, all the English versions are available in different forms. I think some of the older stuff had to get as e-copies, but you can certainly get copies of the Tilted Axis, and you can definitely get copies of Elsewhere, which is published by Faber. But it has been an absolute pleasure, yeah, and thank you very much for joining me on the Rippling Pages.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for reading the books, coming up with the questions. Thank you for this conversation.